Okay. I died on an operating table, while my husband sat in the waiting room, already planning the new life he would build with the $2 million insurance payout from my death. Then, without warning, I opened my eyes again. For several seconds, I couldn't understand what was happening. The blinding surgical lights were gone, the frantic alarms had vanished. And instead of lying beneath a team of doctors fighting to restart my heart, I was back in a quiet hospital room with a thin blanket pulled across my body. The surgery hadn't happened yet. More importantly, the cup of coffee that had killed me was still in my husband's hand. The first thing I noticed was the sharp smell of disinfectant and cheap institutional bleach hanging in the air. It was such an ordinary hospital smell, yet it sent a chill through me because I remembered it from the final minutes of my previous life. Only moments ago, or what felt like moments ago, I had been lying under the harsh lights of an operating room while monitors screamed around me. I remembered the anesthesiologist's frightened eyes above his mask, the pressure crushing my chest, and the terrible burning sensation spreading through my veins as the anesthesia reacted with something already inside my system. Then came the darkness. Along with the absolute certainty that I was dying, my final coherent thought had been about my husband, Ryan. Now, I was breathing again. The air rushed into my lungs so quickly that I nearly choked. My fingers closed around the rough hospital blanket as I tried to convince myself that this was real. My heart was beating normally, strong and steady against my ribs. Then, I heard the voice that turned my blood cold. "Hey, sleepyhead, look what I brought you." I slowly turned toward the door. Ryan Carter, my husband of 5 years, stood beside my bed wearing the expensive navy cashmere sweater I had bought him for our anniversary. His sandy blonde hair was neatly swept back, and his expression was carefully arranged into the familiar look of a devoted husband worried about his wife. Once, seeing him like that would have comforted me. Now the illusion was gone. I no longer saw the charming architect who had swept me off my feet and convinced me that I was the luckiest woman alive. I saw the man who had calmly prepared my death and expected to walk away richer because of it. In his right hand was a steaming cardboard cup of coffee. "I know the pre-op rules are strict," Ryan said with a soft chuckle as he approached the bed, "but you're still within the window for clear liquids. A black coffee, no sugar, no cream, exactly how you like it." He held the cup toward me. In my previous life, I had accepted it without hesitation. I had been terrified of the gallbladder surgery, even though everyone kept assuring me it was routine. Ryan had stayed beside me all morning, holding my hand and telling me everything would be fine. When he brought me coffee, I had actually felt grateful. I drank every last drop. The coffee had tasted unusually bitter, but when I mentioned it, Ryan laughed and said the cafe must have changed its roast. 30 minutes later, hospital staff wheeled me toward the operating room. Shortly after the anesthesia was administered, my heart stopped. Now, staring at the same cup in his hand, I finally understood what had happened. Steam curled through the opening in the lid, carrying the rich smell of roasted coffee. Under ordinary circumstances, it would have been comforting. Instead, all I could think about was what might be hiding inside. "Emily?" Ryan tilted his head. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Are you feeling okay?" I almost laughed at the irony. In a way, I had seen one my own. "I'm fine," I said, although my voice sounded rough and unfamiliar. Every instinct inside me screamed to confront him. I wanted to knock the cup from his hand, demand to know how long he had been planning my death, and make him explain how he could sleep beside me every night while secretly waiting for me to die. But anger wouldn't save me, evidence would. If I started screaming that my husband was trying to murder me, the nurses might assume I was suffering from severe pre-surgical anxiety. Ryan would deny everything, act concerned for my mental state, and the coffee would probably disappear before anyone thought to test it. I had already died once because I trusted him. I wasn't going to waste my second chance by acting recklessly. Ryan extended the cup again. Drink it while it's hot. I reached toward him, and for a moment I saw his shoulders relax. Then, instead of taking the cup, I wrapped my fingers around his wrist. His pulse was faster than it should have been. Interesting. You know what? I said carefully. I don't think I want coffee anymore. My stomach feels awful, and even the smell is making me nauseous. Something changed in his face. It lasted less than a second, a tightening of his jaw, a slight narrowing of his eyes. But I saw it clearly: irritation. Then the loving husband expression returned. Hey, come on, Emily. You've been complaining about a caffeine headache all morning. Just have a couple of sips. You'll feel better before they take you in. No, put it on the tray. Ryan remained still for a fraction of a second, and I could almost see him recalculating his plan. The obedient wife he had expected to finish the poisoned coffee was refusing to cooperate. Finally, he placed the cup on the rolling tray beside my bed. Fine, he said tightly. But if you wake up with a migraine, don't say I didn't warn you. He walked toward the window and shoved his hands into his pockets. I watched him carefully. 3 months earlier, Ryan had insisted that we update our life insurance policy. I hadn't questioned it, because married couples did things like that, and I trusted him. The policy was worth $2 million, and Ryan was the sole beneficiary. Looking back, there had been other warning signs too, all of which I had explained away because I loved him. Late-night phone calls he claimed were from clients, money disappearing from our joint savings account, a second phone hidden among his belongings, and his increasingly close relationship with Vanessa Reed, one of the surgical coordinators at this hospital. Then there were the gambling debts. In my first life, I had discovered pieces of the truth too late. Only as I was dying did everything begin to fit together. Ryan had accumulated enormous debts and desperately needed money. My death solved his problem. The untouched coffee beside me wasn't simply proof that my marriage had been a lie. It was the evidence that could keep me alive and send him to prison. I glanced toward the digital clock. It was 9:15 p.m., and my operation was scheduled for 10. I had 45 minutes to destroy the plan Ryan had spent months building. Taking a slow breath, I reached for the nurse call button and pressed it. Ryan immediately turned from the window. What are you doing? Are you in pain? I feel strange, I said. His eyes flicked toward the untouched coffee before returning to me. My heart is racing and my chest feels tight. For the first time that morning, genuine panic appeared on his face. That reaction told me everything. His plan required me to appear perfectly healthy until anesthesia was administered. If I suddenly developed symptoms before surgery, doctors would postpone the procedure and the clean explanation of an unexpected surgical complication would fall apart. It's anxiety, Ryan said quickly as he moved toward the bed. You're nervous, that's all. He reached for the control panel, clearly intending to cancel the call. I pulled it away before he could touch it. Don't. I know what anxiety feels like. This is different. Before he could argue, the hospital room door opened. Vanessa Reed walked inside. Her auburn hair was pulled into a severe bun, and her dark green scrubs gave her the polished appearance of someone who prided herself on being calm and professional. Her eyes landed on me first and then moved toward Ryan. Something passed silently between them, a slight tightening around her mouth and a brief change in Ryan's expression. It was almost invisible, but now that I knew what I was looking for, I couldn't miss it. They were working together. Mrs. Carter, Vanessa said smoothly, the front desk told me you pressed the call button. We're nearly ready to transfer you to pre-op. Is there a problem? Yes, I want to speak with Dr. Morgan immediately. Vanessa's expression stiffened slightly. Dr. Morgan is preparing for surgery. What's wrong? My heart is racing, I'm dizzy, and something doesn't feel right. She checked the monitor beside the bed. My heart rate was elevated, although most of that was probably caused by the adrenaline flooding my body. Your pulse is a little high, she said. That's very common before surgery. People become anxious. She reached toward my AV. I can give you something mild to help you relax. No. I pulled my arm away quickly enough that the tape around the AIV tugged against my skin. Do not put anything into my AIV. Ryan stepped in immediately. Vanessa, I'm sorry, she's terrified about going under. He looked at me with the patient, embarrassed expression of a husband dealing with an unreasonable wife. Emily, sweetheart, you're making this much harder than it needs to be. Let her do her job. I ignored him. I want Dr. Morgan, and I want another blood test before anyone gives me medication. Vanessa frowned. What kind of blood test? I looked directly into her eyes, a toxicology screen. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. Ryan went completely still, while Vanessa's hand stopped inches from my AIV. That single reaction was more convincing than any confession. A toxicology screen? Vanessa repeated. Mrs. Carter, that's extremely unusual. Your preoperative blood work was already done yesterday. I don't care. I want it documented that I'm requesting a toxicology screen before anesthesia. Ryan understood exactly where this was going, and he moved quickly. You know what? Maybe it's the coffee, he said, his voice suddenly bright, almost cheerful. Maybe the cafe accidentally gave me something much stronger than usual. I'll get rid of it. The smell is probably making you feel worse anyway. He reached toward the tray. I grabbed the cup before he could touch it and held it firmly against my chest. Don't touch this. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Ryan stared at me, and something in his expression told me he finally understood. He didn't know how I had discovered the truth, but he knew I wasn't guessing. The trusting wife he had manipulated was gone. The door opened again before he could respond. Dr. Morgan entered carrying a tablet. He was an older surgeon with gray, beginning to show at his temples, and the weary expression of someone facing an overcrowded operating schedule. What seems to be the problem? He asked. We're supposed to be preparing for surgery. I am withdrawing my consent for the moment, I said. Dr. Morgan looked surprised. Emily, we discussed this. Your gallbladder needs to be treated. Delaying too long isn't a good idea. I understand, but I have reason to believe that my husband tampered with this coffee. I raised the cup slightly. I want it sent to the laboratory. And I want my blood tested by someone who hasn't been involved in preparing me for surgery. The room became completely silent. Dr. Morgan looked from me to the coffee, then toward Ryan, and finally Vanessa. Ryan was the first to react. This is ridiculous. She's terrified of surgery. She's having some kind of breakdown. Dr. Morgan's expression changed. If you genuinely believe your wife is experiencing a psychological crisis, severe enough to make accusations like this, then she certainly isn't in a condition to proceed with elective surgery. Ryan opened his mouth but didn't answer. Dr. Morgan looked toward Vanessa. Get the floor supervisor and call phlebotomy. Vanessa hesitated. Now. She turned and left. Ryan watched her disappear through the doorway, then glanced toward the hallway as if he were considering whether he could somehow leave. For the first time, he looked trapped. His perfect plan was beginning to collapse. Within 20 minutes, my quiet hospital room had been transformed into a controlled scene of frantic medical and security activity. Linda Parker, the floor supervisor, arrived with 2 hospital security officers. Mr. Carter, she said firmly, I need you to move away from the patient and sit in the corner. Ryan protested immediately. This is my wife. I love her. This whole situation is insane. I didn't answer him. A senior phlebotomist entered pushing a cart, and I carefully handed her the coffee. Please seal this and document everyone who handles it. I don't want it disappearing. She glanced at Dr. Morgan. He nodded, and the cup was placed into a sealed evidence container. Afterward, several tubes of blood were drawn so the hospital could run a broad toxicology panel. Ryan sat in the corner with his head lowered, his hand shaking. He knew that once the laboratory analyzed the coffee, there would be no reasonable explanation left. The preliminary results came back less than an hour later. By then, police had already been contacted. Detective Marcus Cole arrived in a rumpled suit, looking tired but extremely alert. He entered my room at almost the same moment. Dr. Morgan returned, carrying a printed laboratory report. Dr. Morgan looked physically sick. The coffee contained substances that absolutely should not have been there, he told the detective. He explained that the combination could become extremely dangerous when mixed with general anesthesia, potentially causing sudden cardiac failure while making the event appear to be an unexpected medical complication. Detective Cole studied the report, then slowly raised his eyes toward Ryan. Ryan's face had gone gray. He didn't try to explain because there was nothing left to explain. My hospital room was declared part of an active criminal investigation, and Ryan was placed under arrest on suspicion of attempting to kill me. As the handcuffs closed around his wrists, I finally allowed myself to believe that what had happened was real. Somehow, I had returned to the moment before my death and changed the ending. But Ryan wasn't the only person who would be leaving the hospital in custody. While officers escorted him into the hallway, shouting broke out near the nurse's station. Vanessa had apparently attempted to clock out quietly and leave through another exit. She didn't get far. Police stopped her in a stairwell before she could leave the building. Over the next several days, the investigation grew much larger than anyone initially expected. My gallbladder procedure was postponed, while doctors ensured that no dangerous substance remained in my system. When the operation was finally performed under completely controlled circumstances, everything went smoothly. This time, I woke up. Detective Cole kept me informed as investigators worked through Ryan and Vanessa's phones, financial accounts, hospital records, and travel history. Vanessa broke first. Once she realized how much evidence the police had and how severe the charges could become, she began cooperating. The story she gave them was worse than I imagined. Ryan's gambling had spiraled out of control. Hidden financial records showed that he owed nearly $800,000 to illegal bookmakers and had almost no realistic way to repay it. Then there was my life insurance policy. $2 million, with Ryan as the sole beneficiary. Investigators discovered that some of the documents connected to the recent policy changes contained forged information. Ryan had spent months putting the financial side of his plan into place. Vanessa provided the medical opportunity. Their messages showed that they had discussed my surgery repeatedly when it would happen, which staff members would be present, what medical conditions might appear believable, and how a sudden death under anesthesia could potentially be dismissed as a tragic complication. Vanessa had abused her hospital access to obtain restricted medication. Ryan had the motive, Vanessa had the access, and together they built the rest of the plan. The police also found something that made the betrayal even harder to process. Ryan had purchased 2 first-class one-way tickets to Buenos Aires, one for himself and one for Vanessa. The departure date was exactly 2 weeks after my scheduled surgery. 2 weeks after the day I was supposed to die. My murder wasn't simply supposed to pay his debts. It was supposed to finance their new life together. I spent days staring at the ceiling of my hospital room, trying to understand how I had shared a bed with someone capable of planning something so coldly. For 5 years, I had believed I knew Ryan. I knew which side of the bed he preferred, how he liked his coffee, which songs he played while working, and the expression he made whenever he was pretending not to be annoyed. Yet somehow, I had missed the most important thing. I had never truly known the man beside me. 8 months later, the criminal trial began. By that point, the case had become a media spectacle. Okay. Reporters filled the courthouse because the story sounded almost unbelievable. A successful architect accused of plotting to murder his wife during what should have been routine surgery, all for insurance money and a secret affair. Courtroom 302 was packed almost every day. When I entered on the first morning, I wore a tailored crimson suit. The color was deliberate. Ryan had planned for my heart to stop beating, and I wanted him to see me standing there alive. He looked nothing like the man I remembered. The perfectly styled hair, expensive clothes, and easy confidence had disappeared. Sitting at the defense table was a pale, exhausted man whose county-issued clothing seemed too large for him. His hands trembled constantly, and for most of the trial he avoided looking directly at me. Maybe he was ashamed, maybe he hated me, or perhaps seeing me alive forced him to confront the one thing his mind still couldn't accept. I wasn't supposed to be there. Vanessa's testimony destroyed what little remained of his defense. She took the witness stand on a rainy Tuesday and, as part of her cooperation agreement, described their relationship and the conspiracy in detail. She explained Ryan's debts, the insurance policy, their plans to leave the country, and the preparations surrounding my surgery. Then prosecutors began showing their messages. The courtroom became quieter with everyone. Ryan had written about me as though I were a financial asset instead of his wife. He complained about how much of my money he believed he deserved and discussed my death with a coldness that made even strangers in the courtroom uncomfortable. The worst moment came when prosecutors asked Vanessa why they had been confident the plan would appear medically believable. She hesitated for a long time before admitting that Ryan had experimented beforehand because he wanted reassurance that the scheme would work. The details were disturbing enough that several jurors visibly recoiled. I didn't look at Ryan. Instead, I watched the jury. Whatever uncertainty remained on their faces disappeared. At the same time the criminal trial was unfolding, my divorce attorney, Rebecca Stone, was systematically dismantling the financial life Ryan had tried so desperately to preserve. Rebecca was relentless. The investigation had uncovered gambling debts, forged records, hidden accounts, an affair, insurance fraud, and evidence of an attempted murder conspiracy. Ryan had very little leverage left. By the time our divorce was finalized, I kept the house, the legitimate investment accounts, valuable marital assets, and nearly everything that could legally be separated from his personal liabilities. The gambling debts remained his problem, exactly where they belonged. The criminal jury deliberated for fewer than 4 hours. When everyone returned to the courtroom, I knew the result almost immediately from their expressions. Guilty. Ryan finally looked at me when the verdict was read. For a brief moment, neither of us moved. Then his shoulders collapsed. The judge showed little sympathy. She described the crime as calculated, deliberate, and motivated by extraordinary greed, and imposed a sentence that ensured Ryan would spend decades behind bars. Vanessa received a lengthy prison sentence as well for her participation in the conspiracy and her abuse of hospital access. When officers moved toward Ryan to escort him away, the composure he had struggled to maintain finally disappeared. He broke down at the defense table. I remained seated. For months, I had imagined that moment as some glorious victory in which I would finally feel that everything had been made right. Instead, what came over me was quieter. Relief. When I stepped outside the courthouse later that afternoon, cold autumn air brushed against my face. I stopped on the stairs and took a deep breath. My lungs filled easily. My heart continued its steady rhythm. For the first time since waking in that hospital room, I understood that the second life I had somehow been given truly belonged to me. I sold the house not long afterward. There were too many memories inside those walls, and I didn't want to spend the rest of my life trying to separate what had been genuine from what Ryan had merely pretended to feel. Instead, I bought a bright penthouse downtown with large windows overlooking the city. Morning sunlight flooded the rooms. There were no secret phones, no unexplained withdrawals from bank accounts, and no whispered conversations stopping whenever I entered. There was only peace. With part of the money I recovered, I created a foundation dedicated to helping people trapped in financially abusive relationships. It felt appropriate. Ryan had looked at my money and decided it made my death valuable. I wanted that same money to become a way for other people to reclaim their lives. There was only one thing from my old routine that I refused to give up: coffee. Every morning, I make a fresh cup and walk onto my balcony while the city slowly wakes beneath me. I still drink it black, no sugar, no cream. For a while after the hospital, even the smell of coffee made my stomach tighten because it brought me straight back to that morning and to the cardboard cup Ryan kept urging me to finish. Then one day I realized that avoiding coffee forever would mean allowing him to take one more thing from me. So I made a cup. I wrapped both hands around the warm ceramic mug, breathed in the familiar bitter aroma, and took a slow sip. Nothing happened. My heart continued beating, and the sun continued rising. For the first time, coffee tasted like something entirely different. Freedom. Now I drink it every morning. Sometimes I stand there, looking across the city, and wonder what my life would have been if I had accepted that cup without question for a second time. Then I remind myself that I didn't. Somewhere behind concrete walls and locked steel doors, Ryan wakes each morning knowing that the perfect murder he planned for months collapsed because of one tiny moment he never anticipated. It wasn't because the police were already watching him. It wasn't because Vanessa confessed before the plan began. It wasn't because a doctor noticed something unusual. His entire future disappeared because the wife he believed he understood completely looked at the cup he placed in front of her and simply refused to drink it.